Hello and welcome back. Today I want to talk about sort of like the middle passages. You can call it a midlife crisis or just an in between or the liminal space. Like, there's so many names for the experience that is feeling that something is dying and that whatever is coming next is not quite born. And I would say that I'm currently in one of these phases in my life. Um, like this is something that's come up many many times in my life, but right now I'm going through one of these phases because the thing that is dying for me is earning a living the way that I'm used to doing, through a job and through a salary and all of that, and moving into something that feels a lot more like what I meant to be experiencing. And I think this is actually a transition that a lot of people are currently experiencing as the job market is kind of insane, and just the amount of resumes and everything that people are sending out without receiving anything back because everything is automated, and the chances of your information getting in front of the right person seem so slim. And as I've mentioned before, I was actually laid off from my job back in October of 2024. And so I've been unemployed for quite some time now. And yeah, like, it's been rough, obviously, financially, but it has also led to a lot of questioning about if this was even something that I wanted, because I have been wanting to start my own business, but obviously it's a very, very scary thing, right? It feels very unsure. You don't know where the next clients are going to come from, where the money's going to come from, if you're even if you're able even able gonna be able to do it. Like, there's all these things that in the past have been somebody else's responsibilities, like keeping track of things so that you can do your taxes at the end of the year and stuff like that. So, like, it has seemed like such a momentous task for me for so long that I've just kind of put it off. But now I'm in this situation where it almost feels like just as risky to keep applying endlessly to these jobs that I don't even want, because I don't know. I correct me if I'm wrong, but the job market is just like gross. Like, just the kinds of jobs where a job that used to be 10 different jobs is now combined into one role, and you're supposed to have like 20 years of experience in it, which is insane. Like, I'm maybe exaggerating here, but that's just kind of the way that it feels. And previously in my life, I've never had trouble finding work. It would take me max a month or something. But after like a year of sending out resumes, I was just coming up empty. And so, I decided, why not? Why not try something different? And it seems like the perfect time, in a sense, because there's nothing else going on. So, but yeah, I'm kind of having to transition now from being an employee to being a business owner. And that's a big transition. Like, there's so much that is different about it. Like, and I'm only about 2 months into this, roughly, a little bit less, but I'm still very much at the beginning of this whole adventure. And it does very much feel like one of those phases where the old thing has died for me, like the resumes, the job hunting, the interview stuff. Like, it's something of the past. Like, I just feel like it's time for me to let it go, while at the same time not having fully formed the next step. So I have a vague idea of what I want to do, but at present I don't have, all my operational stuff in place. I don't have my website. I don't have a very super clear idea of what exactly it is that I want to offer. I have lots of ideas, but putting it into words and kind of just like shrinking it down to maybe 2 or 3 services is very difficult, because I tend to be like a jack of all trades. Like, I like dabbling in a bunch of things, and so trying to convince myself to present myself as an expert in 2 to 3 things sounds very, very difficult. So In the long run, I know that I would like to be some kind of coach, some kind of life coach, some sort of like companion to help people get through struggles, and specifically about, becoming, because since we're on the topic of big changes, I think one of the biggest and most ongoing change that we all go through is shifting between sort of our first adulthood and our second adulthood. And so let me kind of illustrate this a little bit better so you understand what I'm saying. But I think, you know, if you look back on your life, and I don't know how old you are watching this, but if you look back on, your earlier years, fresh out of high school, getting into college, that is sort of the transition between childhood or like teenhood into adulthood. And slowly, you start leaving the comfort of home, the comfort of your parents, the safety that brings, if that was a place of safety for you. And you end up in a situation where you're by yourself, and all of a sudden, oh, you have to do your own laundry, you have to do your own dishes, you have to cook your own meals, you have to remember that dentist appointment you have on Wednesday, you have to pay the insurance on your car and just your rent and deal with your landlord and your boss. And, as you keep edging into this new phase of your life, there are a lot of decisions that you have to make and a lot of responsibilities that you have to take on that you didn't have to necessarily deal with beforehand. So you step into adulthood, and you have your experience, like your parents as your sort of example of adulthood, right? What they did. And if you liked what your parents did, you may decide, well, I'm going to follow their path. And if you didn't, you might decide to kind of rebel against their path and choose something different. And then I think there's also like lots of in-betweens between those two extremes where, you might not necessarily like what your parents did, but see the benefits of what they did and then kind of like lean that way. And I was very much sort of that way when I was deciding what to do with my life. And yes and no, in a sense, because I think that even though I was like, originally my plan was to become a teacher, and thinking back now, I'm like, I think I would have been a pretty terrible teacher. Not because I would have been bad at teaching or because I don't care, but more because of my sensitivities and just like the kind of overthinker that I am. I think I would have been completely overwhelmed in schools. And I did work in schools briefly as an educational assistant. And yes, that was very much my experience. I was very overwhelmed. And not only by just the kind of atmosphere of being in schools with like, lots of children, lots of responsibility, lots of like mishaps and things that happen, lots of unpredictability, all of that. But also, strangely, and this is not something that I had expected or anticipated going into this, but what I found really difficult was seeing kids that were struggling and then seeing how little help they were getting. And maybe this was, thinking back, I've often thought that this was kind of a reflection on how I felt as a kid. Just, I moved around lots of schools. Like, I also, at some point, moved from, my family moved, and I actually didn't speak English when I was a kid. My first language is French. And so I had to learn, I was all of a sudden in an environment where, I didn't speak the common tongue sort of thing. Even if I was going to a French immersion school or French school, Francophone school, it was like just the kids generally spoke in English and everything like that. So and it was, anyway, that was part of it. But also there was just kind of like this second component of just kind of being neurodivergent, and that never getting picked up by any of my teachers or either of my parents. And like, understandably, because I was very good at masking. I was very quiet. I was not a trouble causing kid, and so, why why try to figure out something if there seems to be nothing wrong. So, but yes, all of those things kind of led to me feeling, uh, yeah, like school wasn't always the safest space, and also just, um, yeah, just having issues here and there with a lot. But I think that when I was an educational assistant, I saw myself in some of these kids and saw like how little support they were getting and just how far they were falling behind. And um, there was one kid in particular I remember working with that had all these sorts of outbursts, and people just saw him as trouble, just saw him as a problem to be fixed. And all I could see was a kid like crying for help. And that affected me on such a like deep emotional level. Like I still think about this kid, and I feel like he was this reflection of me. And I realize I'm getting kind of off topic here, but yeah, I think that it was kind of confirmation for me that not choosing to become a teacher was the right choice. But it was my initial intent when I went to university, and I took all the prerequisites essentially to get into the teaching program afterwards. But when it came to actually applying for it, something stopped me. I was literally sitting in front of my computer looking at the application, filling it out, and I was not able to hit submit. So, as much as I sort of wanted to follow in my parents' footprints, because both of them are in education, there was something that pulled me away. And it was not because of the educational piece, I think. I actually, like, obviously, I love learning. Um, I love everything that teaches me something, and just I love always like being a lifelong learner and everything. But I think that schools are doing it wrong a lot of the time. Like there's just so many problems in schools, and I saw that firsthand working in a school for a little over a year and a half. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of where I was after high school. And so yeah, whatever your kind of story is there, whether you went to school or not, whether again it was sort of rebellion against what your parents showed you, or you kind of following in their footsteps. Yeah, that was kind of your first adulthood in a sense, where you were doing the best that you could with what you knew about yourself, which you may not know, like have known that much about yourself. And you may have also not been aware so much of your strengths and weaknesses. So there's a video by this YouTuber called Jaiden Animations where she talks about being diagnosed as ADHD. And one of the most interesting parts of the video to me was that she mentioned how this was never really an issue in the past because um, yeah, like when she was in school, she was getting good grades and everything, and the issue didn't start making itself known to her in a sense until she went to university and everything. And part of like she thought back about that and why all of a sudden she was like missing class and skipping class and super late on like meeting deadlines and procrastinating and just staying in her room and not doing things. And she kind of reflected back on that, and she thought probably part of that was that all of a sudden she had to do so much more, right? Things that her parents or her mother would do beforehand, like again, her laundry, like taking her places, just making decisions for her, booking appointments for her, and all of a sudden that was all on her, and she began slipping on a bunch of other things. And yeah, I really love that video. If you haven't seen it, like go see it. I mean, it is an animation if that's not your thing, but I find Jaiden so personable and just anyway. So yeah, like I think that throughout your first adulthood, you sort of encounter yourself, right? You encounter your strengths, your weaknesses, the things that you thought maybe you could do. You come in and you're like gung ho and you're like, I can do anything. And not that I'm saying that you can't, but I think that eventually we kind of realize that we have preferences, we have strengths, we have weaknesses. There are things that we can do better than some other things. Some other things are just really not our thing, right? Like for me, I worked in years in customer service, and I actually hate customer service, like most people. But some people enjoy it. Some people kind of like that level of interaction. And yeah, something else I tried to be a secretary, which I also hated. I didn't like being constantly interrupted, being kind of like at the mercy of whatever came. So, these are all things I thought, oh yeah, sounds easy enough. I can do that. And then I got into it and I was like, actually, I hate this and I'm super anxious now and yada, yada, yada. Like schools, again, was one of those things that I was like, let's give this a shot, and realizing that it wasn't for me. So I think this is a phase of your life where you start individuating. So kind of just becoming more yourself, whether you like it, whether you want to admit it or see it or not. And eventually there's like this point of friction. Like there starts being this friction between who you're trying to be, who you were, like the script that you've been following that was handed to you down from your parents and your upbringing and your culture. And then there's kind of like, yeah, this friction that begins. And eventually, I think that becomes so unbearable. And I think, like, that sometimes it even manifests in things like illness or these chronic conditions and stuff like that. Like, I think that it can really affect us on more than just an emotional level, but it can start because, like, when you think about it, it's stressful to have friction all the time, right? To just feel like to be pushing yourself to do things that just don't fit, that just don't feel right, that just don't feel like they fit you anymore. And yeah, I think that as much as we want to believe that we can do anything or we can be anyone, or I think our natural preferences and things like that start making themselves known. And I do believe in free will. I really do. But I also believe that there is something inside of us, like there is a self, and that self came with its own sort of agenda or whatever you want to call it. Like you came into the world with maybe not a specific mission, but like a range. Like you are meant to be like these people. And finding that out about yourself is very, very difficult because the examples that you have from your parents, right? Your mom, your dad, your grandma, grandpa, like whoever helped take care of you, whoever helped raise you, showed you their example, like where they felt comfortable or where they landed, and they had their struggles too, right? They went through these phases too of, and may still be going through them, because I really do think that this is an ongoing thing, an ongoing theme in our lives that we never really finish. We never fully figure out what we're meant to do or who we are. We just have to keep going in the right direction. But yeah, finding that direction in the first place is incredibly difficult and requires years of experience. And that's why I say that there's almost like a first adulthood and a second adulthood, because in the first one it's very experimental, and you might even like marry somebody and in your second adulthood be like, oh, I married the wrong person. And that's not a bad thing, really, right? Like you were making the best choice at the time that you could with the information that you had. But now that you're so much further into this whole life thing and that you've had failures, right? Like that's a big one. Like as a kid, you may not have had that many failures, right? You were in school, everything was safe, your parents took care of you. And then when you start attempting life on your own, that's when the disappointments come, the heartbreaks, the job loss, the losing your pet, right? I recently lost one of my pets and it was absolutely crushing. Losing people in your life, losing friends, losing like all these things, and failing too sometimes, just thinking, oh yeah, I can totally do this or I'm gonna nail this, and then absolutely falling flat on your face and it being a total failure. And that's important information too, I think. I think it's really beneficial in a sense to have failed. And yeah, because it teaches you so much. It's kind of like mistakes. You know how mistakes can teach you so much more than getting it right, because you have felt sort of like it came to you on an emotional level where you have felt what it felt like to have to deal with the repercussions of whatever mistakes that you made. And so you learn from them. But I think it's kind of the same thing with your first adulthood. You make mistakes, you take wrong turns, you do things that don't fit like you to fit in or to be a specific person that you think you should be. And eventually that starts to wear away. And I think your true self, your core self, starts to come out of that. And I think that can come to people in their younger age or much later in life. There's really no uh, set point. I think like I said, it's sometimes been called the midlife crisis, but I don't think it has to happen necessarily at the midpoint of your life. It can happen at any point. But I think you do need some lived experience. And obviously, some people live a lot more stuff and a lot more hard stuff early on, and that can cause them to mature much more quickly. Or I think there's all these things basically that can influence when this happens. But I think at some point in our lives, whether it's, at 25 or on our deathbed, there's a period of time where, you start seeing that discrepancy between who you actually are and who you've been. And you start seeing that doesn't, like, the two just don't fit together anymore. And you kind of have to choose. And I think some people will choose to like truck on and just keep going because of whatever reason, right? And sometimes people get so sucked into whatever they're doing. Like, some people identify so closely with their roles, like especially when it comes to work or parenthood. I think parenthood is like a big one where, somebody's like, I am a mother, and then when their kids move out, it's kind of like, well, what am I now? And that can trigger this kind of person identity crisis in them. And I could totally happen to fathers as well, of course. But and then I think, yeah, it can happen with jobs too. Like, if you've been at a job for 20, 30 years, you might totally see your role in this company as like part of who you are. And if that company shuts down or whatever, right, it can just crush you, because all of a sudden you're like, well, what am I without this? Like, this is something that I'm seeing in my dad right now, because he's been at the same job for, I don't know, 30 years now or so, and he's close. He's a few years away from retirement, and I can, like, he doesn't talk about it so much, but it's almost like I can feel the panic inside of him of like, what am I without this? Like, what am I without my team, without my work, without my schedule, without my routine, without my responsibilities, without the sense of accomplishment, however small or big, that I get from accomplishing these tasks and earning the salary and whatnot. So, yeah, I think sometimes these moments happen after retirement, because all of a sudden everything that you sort of clung to for identity purposes related to your job disappear, and then you are left with just what you haven't cultivated, or what you haven't explored within yourself, and you're faced with that, and there's no more distraction. I guess you can find other distractions like volunteering or something like that, but it is not what I would recommend. I would recommend you go with it, because I think, as I said, it's a lifelong journey, and so it's kind of like, and I think you gain a lot from starting earlier rather than waiting, because you can start making decisions that are more aligned with your true self rather than, again, the script that was handed down to you. So yeah, like, and then when you start making those decisions, like, it's hard, because as I mentioned at the beginning, ends up happening a lot of the time, and what's happening to me and what's happened to me before as well, when I kind of had my identity crisis, is that you just feel like something is dying. You feel like something's being taken away, like you're losing something, like there's a big loss feeling to it, because those beliefs that you clung to, that role that you clung to, the people, the person that you clung to, right? It could like your husband or your wife or your partner or your kids or, these people that you kind of clung on to remain in that sort of identity or in that phase of your life. If they leave you or if you decide to leave them, there is a loss there. And it's like kind of like then you just have this like empty spot in your life that is not filled with anything yet. And it can feel very distressing because you're like I said, right now I'm going through this with trying to start a business where there's so many days that I'm second guessing myself and I'm like, what am I doing? I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, how can anyone take me seriously? Who would hire me, kind of thing. And it's very like I'm filled with doubt basically because I don't know how to do this yet. And I have this emptiness in my life, and unfortunately this emptiness in this case also comes with a lot of other stressors, right? Because I do have, like everybody else, I have bills to pay and mortgage and yada yada yada. So it feels like, and I found too that when you let go of those things to end up in this liminal space, that there's a lot, not only is there a lot of unknown, but there, like, sometimes you just want to run back. Like, you just want to go back. But there's, like, I don't think there's any, you can't go back. You know, even if I were to find a job again, I know that it would be temporary because it's like that part is dead now. I can go back and, like, visit the grave, for a little bit, put some flowers, tend to it or whatever. Like, I can go back and revisit it, but I know in my heart, like I know in my soul that is just, that part of my life is dead. It's gone and it's not coming back. And I'm meant to move into this next thing. And I think that's, where this transition becomes very interesting when we're talking from the point of view of your life and just like who you are and going from like who you were taught to be, to who you are and who you are meant to be. And, that transition, as I said, I think it's a lifelong thing, but what starts to happen is that you get closer and closer to the heart of it, like to what you were meant to do. And again, I don't think necessarily there's one specific track that we're all meant to go in, but I think there's like a sort of like idea, like there's a, how do I put this? I can't find the word for it, but like there's a grouping or like there's a general direction again. And you may not know what that direction is. And in fact, something that I've been sort of talking about to the people in my life is that for me, 2025 felt like an unthawing. I felt, so like I said, I was let go in October 2024, and then I was unemployed in 2025. And it started out being like, honestly, my first feeling when I was let go was I am free. And and then that transitioned into me sort of slowly feeling like I was coming alive again. I felt like I'd been in this like winter phase of my life that was that just everything was just frozen. The ground was not, like I couldn't plant anything, nothing would grow. And I just started feeling this unthawing, like I was coming back to myself. And all of that has led to this moment now where I'm trying to, I'm attempting to do this, and I'm recording these, which is something that I've wanted to do for a long time because I've been so afraid of being visible and so afraid of all my flaws and my stumbles and all of that. But I'm at this point where I'm so tired of that old script, of those old fears, and it's kind of like, well, I think at this point I would prefer to be in the discomfort of trying and trying to get to the next step or the next phase or the next something, rather than the discomfort of knowing I am not where I'm supposed to be. And so it is a very uncomfortable state. And if you are facing that state, like I said, I think those moments come about multiple times in our lives. Sometimes there's two happening at once. Sometimes there's three, right? Like there's just these moments. But I see these moments as opportunities because yes, something is dying, that's for sure, and we can feel that, and we can feel the grief and the loss of that. But what we don't quite see yet is what is coming on the other side. Like, what, after we get through this phase, what will be waiting for us on the other side. And yeah, something that I've been saying this year. So yeah, the unthawing, but I've also felt like this was a year, 2025 was a year of no's. And what I mean by that is that I was like, I kept asking myself, like, would I want to do this? Would I want to do that? Would I want to do this? And it was always like, no, 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 no. And it, like, I started panicking because I was just like, okay, yeah, this is dying. Like, all these no's, like, everything is a no. When am I going to hit a yes? And it took a while to start getting at the yeses, because there are things that had been sort of like in my head for some time that I was like, yeah, I want to try this, I want to try that, but and I really took the time to look at these things kind of one at a time and be like, okay, let's look at this as not just like the fun bits, right? Like, I don't know, an idea for me would have been like, I want to be an artist. Like, I want to learn to draw and draw comics online and stuff. And I'm not saying that's like a definite no in this case, but I did feel like, do I want to take the time to learn anatomy and just like drawing skills and coloring and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I don't think that I'm invested enough in this. Unfortunately, like, as much as I admire people who do this, and I love artists, and I just love, people who do this, like, and I have enjoyed it myself in the past as well. I just don't feel like necessarily this is where I'm meant to put my energy at this moment. So that is a no. And yeah, having lots of no's can feel really, really scary. But eventually I started hitting some maybes, some yeses and some maybes, like in that range between yes and maybe. And yeah, like that has felt really, really good. And to kind of, I think to wrap up this video, I'll just use a metaphor sort of thing that Martha Beck uses, where she talks about how, in life you're kind of like, and I might butcher this, but you're kind of like in a boat, right? And you might be heading towards a direction that you may not have chosen, right? Again, your script, your parents, your culture, your whatever influences were part of your upbringing. And so you've been heading in this direction, and you might know, like instinctively, that that is not where you want to go. You know where you might end up, and you see that kind of like, you have that foresight, and you're like, that's not actually where I want to go. And you might not know which direction you want to go in, right? But you might have a slight pull towards one direction more than others, and it's all about just, so she says, like, basically 1 degree shifts. Like, 1 degree shift on a compass will take you somewhere completely different than where you were originally heading. And I think that's kind of like the secret sauce in all of this, is that you don't have to, when you're in these liminal phases, you don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to kind of follow your gut towards a maybe, or like a yes maybe, right? Like, and just kind of start heading that way. And if that turns out to be a no, you're at least a little bit closer to where you're supposed to be, right? Like, you might have to just another little 1 degree shift, and another one, and eventually you start getting closer and closer to where you are meant to be. So that's my little ramble of the day. I hope you enjoyed. I, as always, invite you to leave your comments or message me or whatever. If you have any comments or stories that you want to share with the group, I'd love to hear it. But until next time, I will say see you later, and thanks for listening. Bye.